favorite beverage. It's time for the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what's up? This is Matt McPeek. You are listening to Week 1 preview episode, Part 1 of the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for joining me. Unfortunately, I'm riding solo again, but I have a couple segments for you that I think you will enjoy in this Week 1 edition of the podcast. Just got done with my third draft in 3 days. It was my all-IDP draft. Shout out to Kev out there, the defending champ. He took probably half of his roster is guys that I had highlighted that I wanted, but that's how it goes sometimes. So you just got to adapt, improvise, and overcome, right? So this week we're going to start off this first episode, and hopefully this is kind of going to be the format going forward for the season. We're going to look at some of the key injuries going into Week 1. There's obviously a couple guys that are holding out, and they're going to be big time players if and when they do return. So those are guys definitely worth talking about. We're also going to go into some of these pre-fantasy football draft, end of training camp, end of preseason trades and cuts. One team in particular, the Houston Texans, have been awfully busy. So we'll get into that. And then obviously we have our first preview of the Thursday night game, the kickoff game of the week here, of the season, really. The Green Bay Packers visiting the Chicago Bears. So let's jump right into it. So first, I want to go over some of these injuries. Make sure you're aware of these guys and some of the injuries that they're dealing with. So, if they end up being out Week 1, you're not surprised. Make sure you have a backup plan. So obviously, we'll start with the two guys that are holding out. Have been getting a lot of attention all draft season for us, at least. Zeke Elliott and Melvin Gordon. So Zeke's still holding out. He wants that new contract. I kept him in one of my in my only keepers league, and I drafted him 5th overall in another league. So obviously, I was kind of hoping he'd be back by now. And honestly, even if he gets signed tonight, today is Monday, Memorial Day. I'm recording Monday night. Hopefully this will be out by Tuesday night, Wednesday morning for you guys. But, even if he signs this week, I don't expect him to play Week 1. I think if the Cowboys were to make him the highest paid running back in NFL history, I don't think they're going to be all that anxious to get him out there right away. I think they're going to be patient with him. So hopefully he signs sooner rather than later, because he's a top 5 back in this league, and the Cowboys, I'm sure, are as eager to get him back as I am. And then the next guy, Melvin Gordon, he is apparently not planning on reporting for Week 1. There's all these rumors out there about trades, and he was apparently given the ability to seek a trade, and so he's probably going through all that right now. And at this point, even if he is traded or signed within, before Sunday rolls around, I don't think the team, whatever team he ends up on, I don't think they're going to be starting him Week 1 either. So I would be prepared to throw those guys in your IR slot if you have them, or if they're eligible for your IR slot. But definitely have a backup plan in line. If you're the Zeke owner, and you go online, you look up, and you see that his backup is available. It's why we were talking about handcuffs. He's probably worth playing Week 1 if Zeke is holding out. So keep that in mind. Going forward with actual injured players, we got AJ Green. He's apparently still walking around in a walking boot with that ankle injury. We've heard and seen reports that he might miss 2 to 3 weeks. We've seen reports that he might miss up to 10 weeks. That to me tells me that the reporters have no idea. So it's definitely something you're going to want to keep an eye on. I drafted him in a full point PPR the other night, 2 nights ago, probably in the 6th round, I think it was. If he comes back, if he plays 10, 12 games, that's good enough for me. He's a top 10 wide receiver if he's healthy, so hopefully he gets back. Another guy dealing with a sprained foot, I think it was, back in week 2, Mr. Cam Newton. But their GM, Marty Hernay, is apparently optimistic that he'll be able to play week 1, so we'll have to keep an eye on him. Again, have a backup plan in line. Be ready to hit that waiver wire if you didn't draft a backup quarterback. Another wide receiver, big name wide receiver that's dealing with an injury, Mike Evans. He's got a quad and a groin injury that has kept him out of the entire preseason, but it seems like he's going to be ready for week 1. So I'm very excited about him. I know Adam is also excited about him. I think might have picked him up or might have added him for one of his DFS segments, which we will get to after when we're done. Right before we do the Packers Bears preview, we'll drop in Adam's DFS segment. Another wide receiver, Amari Cooper. He practiced for the first time today in a month, and he says he feels ready to play. But plantar fasciitis is something that I think could flare up anytime. I'm not a doctor, but we've seen receivers and running backs in the past that have had this, and it seems something that you just never know. So again, I'd keep my eye on him and make sure you got a backup in line to take his spot if he's out. It seems to be the theme here. We got another wide receiver, big name wide receiver, Odell Beckham Jr. He's got a hip injury that he's made sound like it's a non-issue, but for a guy that has had as many issues, injury issues as Odell Beckham, again, I'd be prepared to possibly sit him if Sunday morning rolls around and that big red O comes up for out. Be prepared, have somebody in line ready. And the last wide receiver that I'd be worried about going into week 1 is Kiki Kute, or QT, however the hell you say it. He's got an ankle injury. It's something that's, again, kept him out of preseason. And it looks like he may miss week 1. The head coach there, Bill O'Brien, says he's trending in the right direction, but I think the trade of Kenny Stills to the Texans gives them another option and lets them take their time with Kiki. I don't think they're going to rush him now that they got 3 legit wide receivers that they can count on going into this season. So there is a list of, seems like a lot of wide receivers, but there's plenty of other guys that are dealing with little injuries. You got Julian Edelman with what looked like a wrist injury that he came out of that last preseason game with, and Aaron Jones has been dealing with some stuff throughout the training camp and throughout the preseason. So keep an eye on these guys because you never know week 1. So I want to get into some of these last-minute trades and cuts that we saw. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, we saw the Texans make a lot of moves. We saw Duke Johnson get traded from the Browns for a 2020 draft pick. Turned out to be a pretty huge trade for them after Lamar Miller tore his ACL a week or 2 later. So it's a guy that they're obviously going to rely a lot on, and I'm sure they'll also be relying on another guy they traded for, Carlos Hyde, traded from the Chiefs to the Texans for an offensive guard that apparently was going to be cut anyway. It looked like Carlos Hyde was going to be cut as well, so it seems like it was a good trade for both teams. They both got something that they needed. Again, as I just mentioned, Kenny Stills gets added. I have a feeling it was an add-on to the Laramie Tunsil deal. The Texans, obviously, last year, if you watched any of their games, their offensive line was absolutely horrible. So they needed to make a move. They got themselves a legit left tackle, and I think the Kenny Stills addition was just a little throw-in. Apparently he had been pretty critical of the Dolphins owner. He was very public about it, and I think that had something to do with why he's gone. He was probably their best player on offense, at least going into the season, and now that he's gone, I mean that offense looks like it's going to be pretty bad. So, and Kenny Stills is a great fit for them because obviously he's got the ability to step in for both Kiki Kute in the slot, or he can play outside, and if Will Fuller were to miss time. And obviously, both of them missed significant time last year. One with, I think Fuller tore his ACL, and Kiki either had a hamstring or a quad or something like that, maybe even an ankle. I'm not sure, but I think it was a great addition for them. So he's someone that I think if Kiki were to miss time and he's available on the waiver wire and you're maybe not so happy with one or two of your draft picks, he's probably worth picking up, man. So keep an eye on him for sure. The Chiefs then, after trading away Carlos Hyde, they then acquired LaShawn McCoy after he was cut by the Bills. It gives the Chiefs another running back that Andy Reid, the head coach there, is obviously very familiar with from their time in Philly. It gives them a veteran in that running back room, something that they don't have right now. A lot of very young, very talented guys, but keyword very young. So I think this deal was kind of just a way to add in some veteran leadership, give them someone that head coach can trust and someone that can kind of mentor all these running backs that they got there on the roster in Kansas City. So a lot of movement in the last week of this draft. I mean, from the day that Andrew Luck was cut, that obviously had some pretty big fantasy impact, and then some other things that happened, trades, cuts, and whatnot. So it's been a pretty wild training camp, pretty wild preseason here. I'm now going to drop in Adam Nattress's Week 1 DFS play. If you're into daily fantasy, he's someone that you're definitely going to want to, lend an ear to him for a bit. He's super into it, makes multiple lineups every week, plays pretty much every sport you can in daily fantasy. So here's Adam with here's our segment that we actually just recorded about 2 hours ago on my brand new fancy iRig 2. All right, we are here with Adam Nattress. We're doing our Week 1 DFS lineup of the week. So, Adam, why don't you tell the fans what you got going on for your lineup this week, who you like, and why you like them?
Well, as we are closing in, Matt, the excitement is through the roof. And amongst my many lineups I've been making, I pulled my favorite one, my absolute favorite one, to read off today. Now, before I read this off, I want to clarify a few things. One, it is the Sunday main contest. That's the big boy, so this is only the Sunday games. The Thursday on games, they're really not, that's not the main daily fantasy lineup, so when we speak to this, it's really towards the main slate, the big boys with 500,000 people in it.
So now, hold on real quick. The main slate, that means just the 1 o'clock games, or is that 1 and 4 o'clock?
So the main slate is the 1 and 4 o'clock games.
Okay, so this is excluding the Thursday night games and excluding the Monday night game, and the Sunday night, I guess, too, right?
Yep, and okay. Again, the reason that we do it this way is, as with your standard fantasy long league or season long fantasy league, which you're speaking to, half point PPR or full point. In daily fantasy, the Sunday main contest is the early and afternoon games, and that's where you'll see the tournament style entries, in which you'll have tournaments that are 500,000 people, where you can do a quarter to win $5,000, $10,000. You can put as much money in as you'd like and win who knows how much.
Right.
But yeah, the Sunday main contest is the way to go. And that is exactly what we're going to speak towards today.
And now this is, just to clarify, this is FanDuel, not DraftKings, right?
That is correct. So this is FanDuel. FanDuel is a full-point PPR. Again, this is within the tournament setting main contest on FanDuel.
Now, how come you do FanDuel instead of DraftKings? Is there a reason, or have you started out doing FanDuel and kind of stayed with it?
No, actually, to be honest, I started with DraftKings. I don't know if they changed the format, but back then it was 2 quarterbacks, and I didn't like that. I liked my 1 quarterback setting, and that's exactly how FanDuel did it. So that's why I made the switch. I just didn't like doing the 2 quarterback system.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what brought me here.
All right. So why don't you run down these guys and give us their cost, and like I said, just give us a little tidbit as to why you like them, and then at the end, why why you like this lineup. And actually, if you could, before you get into it, just give us a quick minute on what was the strategy going into building this specific lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. So last week I mentioned, and I followed up as I built this specific lineup, that I go about it in a strategic way that I select what order I select my positions in. So this strategy, if you will, is to draft my defense and my tight end at the very beginning, as well as my quarterback. But first I do my defense, my tight end. They are the lower valued price. It really helps set the tone with the average price per player that you have left. So with that in mind, after I do that, I go through the running backs, receivers, and the flex. My goal really is to make sure that I'm utilizing the money given correctly. So that's why I start with the defense as well as the tight end and then move forward from there. And when I say that, that's exactly how I built this lineup. Again, my favorite lineup that I have currently going into it. I use this system to build this lineup, and in fact, I'm going to tell you the reason why I like this lineup before I go into it, so that way some of the picks kind of clarify themselves. So, as we talked about, week one is a little sloppy. Everybody's still kind of getting their bearings. A lot of the starters don't play preseason anymore, so, it's really it's really the gun at the gate, right? It's their first physical contact football outside of practice. So you can't expect perfection from the offenses, and notoriously, you don't see it from the offenses. So what I did this week was really try to build a lineup of familiarity. And what that is the guys, for the most part, now there will be one exception, I will specifically highlight that when we get to it, but for the most part, guys that are with the same team, have a good feel and a good chance week one to get the bulk of the work they need to get the value that we spoke about before, which again is 5 times their price. If you can get that, you're going to win some money. So, without further ado, going into my lineup, my premier lineup for week one, I like at quarterback none other than Jared Goff playing the Carolina Panthers for $7,800. Now, Jared Goff slots in with others like Carson Wentz. Russell Wilson's $400 more, and Russell Wilson has a great matchup, but I went with Goff for a little less because I wanted, A, the extra couple hundred to spend elsewhere, and B, his offense is almost entirely intact. I mean, Todd Gurley, it was a weird question mark, but from a Jared Goff standpoint, he's got his receivers back. Carolina's defenses, they're not looking great, so I expect him to come in again, week one, with that familiarity and be able to put up some points, enough so that he meets his value. And then being able to save that money is big because for running back, I was able to go Dalvin Cook for $7,400. Again, not the most expensive. That's a pretty good price for him, and he's playing Atlanta. Their defense, as we talked about last week,
they got murdered by running backs last year.
Yep, and Dalvin is in a prime position. I mean, I see no reason to spend more money than that right there. Again, back to this week one ordeal. He's been there. I mean, I know he was hurt, but the offense is the same. I think that you're going to see Dalvin in a very good position starting right out of the gate to get some big points. And that offense just gets diced. And speaking of, our defense gets diced. And speaking of defenses that are just not good, and of which we spoke last week, my next running back is Leonard Fournette, playing Kansas City. Leonard's $7,200. Kansas City's defense is terrible. It's going to remain that way. And they got Nick Foles back there. The familiarity to the offense is going to be Leonard Fournette. So they're going to probably lean on him. At least they know he's healthy, too. I mean, when's the last time that's been the case? So, $7,400 and $7,200. I got 2 running backs playing 2 atrocious defenses and left me plenty of money to get into what I think is the core of my week one lineup, the receivers.
I'm not sure if I would say that the Chiefs' defense is atrocious. I mean, they're going to look completely different this year than they did last year. But, I mean, Leonard Fournette is a guy that, at that price, I think you got to play him every week anyway because he's one of these dudes that could easily get 20 carries a game. I mean, the formula for beating Kansas City is obviously to keep Mahomes and that offense on the sideline. So I think the Jags know that.
Give him the ball quite a bit.
Right. So, yeah, I mean,
Nattress just wasn't the right word, but I think that for the, you're right. I mean,
we'll have to wait and see. I mean, they brought in a lot of new faces. They're switching to a 4-3, so we'll see how they look this year. But so far I like it. So why don't we go into the wide receivers here?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for the receivers, I'm going again, guys, familiarity. They're big volume play guys. So first I've got Thielen playing Atlanta. So I do have Cook and Thielen. Normally you'd avoid a running back wide receiver situation. However, I think this is going to be a shootout game early on. You don't really see a lot of them, but I think this one has that potential. $7,400 is a great price. The middle of the pack for that tier 2 and 3 receivers on FanDuel. I think you're going to see quite the output from him. I know he had some general soreness. I think week 1, though, he'll be good to go. And I think he's a great choice. And then you pair him. I got Robert Woods, my combo with Jared Goff there playing Carolina. Robert Woods was $7,000. It's a good matchup, high-powered offense, familiarity with the quarterback. And I think we're going to see great things from Robert Woods and Jared Goff this year. And I think week 1 will be no exception. And then with the money that I've saved so far, you ready for my third receiver, Matt?
Yes, I am.
This is where my breath just got taken away. And this is why I build these lineups like I do. So after meticulously going through and doing my lineup with my strategy, I had enough money there to get Mike Evans as my third receiver. I think Mike Evans is going to be an absolute stud this year. I think it's going to happen right out of the gate. I know everyone's hyped with Chris Godwin, which is, ironically, I think Mike Evans has kind of flown under the radar a bit. I think he's just going to be a beast. And to round out that 3 receiver set, I mean, I think you're looking pretty good with those receivers.
Yeah,
every single one of them is
that's a nice group
guy.
For sure.
Yeah,
I like the lineup so far, for sure.
And this is where we got the money to spend that, right? Here we go. So for tight end, I went with Jack Doyle. I know that I've brought up how Jacoby Brissett could potentially be a disaster going into week 1, but if the past indicates anything, it's that he actually has a pretty good connection with Jack Doyle. So for $5,400, why not? Let's see. He's going to have to throw the ball to somebody. Generally, second-string quarterbacks don't come in and run and gun like that, right? Safety valve. I think Jack Doyle will be a pretty safe play. You might even get a touchdown. You never know. My flex, this is where I'm pretty excited. My flex, I went out of the box, though. This is not following necessarily the rest of the strategy, just more of a hype situation. So for $5,900, now I obviously had to go low because you heard my receivers and running backs. I went with D.D. Westbrook, wide receiver 1 in the making for the Jacksonville Jaguars and Nick Foles. Now, as you mentioned, Kansas City's defense definitely changed, and it could be very much for the better. Still week 1, though, they're still going to take some time to click. And from the reports at camp, Dede and Nick have already started to really get a good rapport, I should say. And for $5,900, if he came out and caught a touchdown, you'd be okay with that. That's a good flex pick. You're hoping at this point, too, that those 3 receivers we named come out and get you a lot of the points. Same thing with Cook and Fournette. But I really feel like D.D. Westbrook has a good chance to shine this year, and I think week 1 for that price might be the lowest you'll be able to get him. And then the last piece of this team, obviously, it's the defense. Now, this pick is really based on recent events, but I am going with the Los Angeles Chargers, even though I have Jack Doyle as my tight end. That doesn't mean the offense is going to sit there and score a whole bunch of touchdowns and move the ball a lot. So the Chargers for $4,000 are a pretty cheap defense. They scored a lot of points last year for a defense. They're a top 10 scoring one. And second-string quarterbacks turn the ball over. So I think you could get pretty good points from them just to round out the rest of the team. So again, that's my team for week 1. Jared Goff, Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Adam Thielen, Robert Woods, Mike Evans, Jack Doyle, D.D. Westbrook, and the Los Angeles Chargers.
I like it. I like the Woods Goff stack. That's obviously something that you see a lot in DFS lineups, especially. And like you were just saying about how you're playing a tight end against the DST that you're playing. If there's one hole in the Chargers' defense, at least from last year, it's the fact that they're going to be playing without that safety. Oh, man, the name just escaped me. Jarwin, damn, can't think of his name, but he was great last year. He was one of what I would consider a tight end eraser.
Derwin James.
Derwin James, that's him. Yeah. So I mean, the fact that they, like you said, they were a great defense last year, and they're playing without their what you would maybe consider him a tight end eraser. So if there's one player that you would want to play against that defense while having that defense in your lineup, I guess it would be a tight end. So good stuff, man. I like the lineup. We'll have to track your your success rate here with these teams and see at the end of the season how you do. So good stuff, and we'll be looking forward to your DFS lineup for next week. And we'll see, possibly, depending on how this week goes, if we can get you on the Part 2 episode, which we'll be recording Thursday night. I got some events going on this week at work, so I'm not sure how the scheduling is going to go, but we'll try and get you on, of course, because I love having you. So thanks again for your DFS lineup. Guys, we'll be doing this every week. Adam will be calling in and giving us his favorite lineup of the week. If the audio sounds a little rough, I just got this new rig, and so I can do phone calls live to tape, as they say. So bear with me, as it might take me a couple weeks to try and get this sounding as good as I can. So, Adam, thanks again, and good luck with all your lineups this week.
Great. Thanks for having me, guys. I hope everyone wins some money.
All right, dude. Take it easy.
Happy fantasy season.
All right, so there is DFS lineup week 1 from Adam. We're going to jump right now into the Thursday night game. Big game here. We got the Green Bay Packers visiting the Chicago Bears. Obviously, some big names playing in this game. First of all, got Aaron Rodgers coming back. To me, I think Rodgers is going to be on a mission this year. Earlier this week, I had a friend ask me, if you had Rodgers and Mayfield in week 1, who would you go with? And I said, I'm going to go with Rodgers. I actually drafted him in my league on Friday night, and I got him and Lamar Jackson. So in that league, I got a pick between the two of them. But I think Rodgers is on a mission, like I said, this year. I think he wants to prove that he's still the best quarterback in the league, not this new young guy, Patrick Mahomes, or Watson and Mayfield slinging the ball around. I think he's going to go drop some, forgot about Dre on people. He's going to channel his inner Brady from a couple years ago after that 4-game suspension when Brady came back and just lit it up. I think he's going to be awesome this year. I think this new offense that he's going to be playing in is going to be good for him. We've heard some things in the news and whatnot about maybe him and LaFleur not getting along this training camp, but I think it's going to be just fine. So obviously, if you got Rodgers, I would play him this week. Aaron Jones is another guy that he's got a big name here. He's probably the best running back out of this group so far, at least in a standard league. Tyreek Cohen might have something to say about that in the PPR league, but Aaron Jones missed a lot of training camp and almost all the preseason with a hamstring injury, I think it was. And now he's got another running back in that crew to compete with, rookie Dexter Williams, along with Jamal Williams. Could see a three-headed monster as it goes by this at some point this season. But I think if Jones is healthy and he's good to go in the first week of the season, I think they're going to rely on him as far as the majority of the workload goes. Obviously, Devontae Adams, you're going to play him. He's a beast. The Packers situation, the Packers wide receiver situation is interesting. We got Geronimo Allison and Mardez Valdez-Scantling from last year, 2 rookies. Geronimo's out for at least first 4 weeks. I think he's got what kind of injury he's got. It's like I think it's an ankle actually from playing up in that stupid Canadian field. But so that number 2 spot is obviously up for grabs between the two of them. We saw them both make some plays last year. We saw them both struggle at times last year. So it's going to be interesting to see how MVS does. being that number 2 guy to start the year. He's going to have a couple games to prove why he should remain that number 2 guy when Allison comes back. But honestly, it's Aaron Rodgers. He can support 3 wide receivers, no problem. So I would play MVS as well. Looking at the Bears, this is a fun offense to look at, really. Trubisky, he was drafted pretty high considering he had only played that 1 year down in North Carolina. He could take a step forward. He could take a step back. We don't know. He's kind of a mystery. He runs a little bit. He's got a decent enough arm where he can make plays. He's got a pretty good crew of talent around him, including David Montgomery, rookie that they drafted this year. The coaches have been ranting and raving about him all offseason. He looks in line to take on all that work left behind by Jordan Howard. I would definitely start him. I would start Tariq Cohen, especially in a PPR league. Last year, he caught a ridiculous amount of passes. And, the coaches had been mentioning stuff about wanting to get him some fewer touches if they could. And I think what's going to happen is they're just going to reduce maybe the amount of carries he gets, but they're going to still throw him the ball for sure, especially when you look at this group of wide receivers. Guys getting hurt, guys in and out of the lineup. You got Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller. Robinson comes from Jacksonville 2 years ago, has a pretty rough season, injuries, whatnot. So I don't really know if there's a legit number 1 there. I think the way that Matt Nagy's going to spread the ball around like he has, it really doesn't matter if there's a number 1 there. I'm not too big on any of these wide receivers. So I guess I would start Allen Robinson as maybe your second wide receiver in a PPR, but in a standard league, I don't know. I'd probably stay away from it. The one guy I would try and get into a DFS lineup if possible is Cordell Patterson. Saw last year in New England, he has some versatility to him for sure. He was running the ball. They threw him the ball on screens, and they used him in the slot. They used him to run deep routes. They used him for all kinds of things. And I think in that offense with Matt Nagy, you're going to see a lot of that. You're going to see him running jet sweeps. You're going to see him running all over the field. So as a DFS play, he might be somebody worth looking at, considering he's probably pretty cheap, and you only really need one of those gadget plays to hit. So that's somebody I would look at. So that does it for the Week 1 preview of the season here for the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we are going to be coming back next week. We're going to try and record Thursday, part 2, and then you'll hear us back next week on hopefully Tuesday night to drop in some more DFS stuff for you. So stay tuned.
You have been listening to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. For more episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Beers and Bruisers is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach TV, or your favorite podcast service. Beers and Bruisers is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com or download the free HC Universal Network app today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gaming operates a national problem gambling helpline network. Contact them today at 1-800 888-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to drink responsibly and always look for your man downfield.